Welcome to Positive Chats. We're doing something a bit different this time. As you can see, I'm not John. He'll be back soon, probably for the best. In the meantime, I'm sitting here with Ben, who's an awesome guy. We're going to have a bit of a chat about freelancing, how that's different to small and big business, how that works, and he can just tell us how much of an awesome success it is.
Thanks very much.
Tell us a little bit about you to start us off.
I'm Ben. My website is www.iamben.co.uk. I have been freelancing for the last 4 or so years, doing various bits, sort of development, design, a bit of anything really that's exciting and internet based, and done all right out of it.
Okay, cool. Yeah. What exciting stuff have you worked on? What's your favourite project in the last few years?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't think any of them have been. There's not one that I would pinpoint as being a favourite for anything. But I think anything that you can get done quickly and get paid for, get on with is always a success.
From a business point of view, those are your favourite kind of projects.
From a personal point of view, there's always a project that's a little bit more exciting than something else. Yeah. So someone will say, "Can you do XXXX?" And you think, that's a bit more of a challenge or a bit more of an exciting sort of route. I mean, there's been a number of those. None of them particularly stick out as being amazing, which sounds terrible, doesn't it?
But you do amazing work. I've seen some of the stuff that you've done, and it looks incredible. And your clients have had a lot of success off the back of it as well.
Some of them have, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the key to it. I think as long as they're happy, I keep getting paid, and
because one of the things that we're judged on, a lot of the projects that we do, although our business models might be a bit different, we regularly create these kind of content or web development type pieces. We're judged on success metrics of how well they do in social media, how many links they get, how good the PR traction is from them. Does any of that factor in to your business? Or do clients just come to you and say, build this for us, and all the rest of it is their problem?
I think, mostly that, but I think it depends who the client is. So for some clients, there's no sort of success metric in anything other than they want something online.
It's got to be beautiful.
There's just something there that they need for whatever reason.
Yeah.
For other clients, there is obviously exactly the same sort of thing, but I kind of tag out after it's been made. And
okay, so do you have regular partners that you would work with that would pick up the other bit, or is that left to clients?
It's mostly left to clients, or I will be working for an agency or a client that does that specifically, but doesn't necessarily take on the actual content.
So you do a certain amount of work that's outsourced from agencies, maybe similar to what...
I think, absolutely. I think it's there was a point where I thought I can't be everything to everybody, if you see what I mean. And there's things that I would just rather... There's things that people do better than I do considerably, so why do it, if you see what I mean?
Just do the stuff that you enjoy doing.
Just do the stuff I enjoy doing, absolutely, and do relatively well.
Do relatively comfortably
well, yeah.
So you're not pushing to grow?
I was asked this question the other day actually, about surely the end game for a freelancer is to run an agency, and I don't think that's ever been my end game or end goal. I think there's been times over the last few years when I've been busy enough to probably take on someone else, and if I could have pushed and then found more work and kept growing, I suppose. But it's never been I've never thought I want to run a team, I want to do anything like that.
Yeah, there's other challenges involved in that, and some of it's quite boring and tedious.
I don't think that's the real reason. I don't know. I think I know a lot of people who run agencies, or I think looking at them, it's not something that I've wanted. It's not a road I wanted to travel down, if you see what I mean. I think also the reason I did freelancing in the first place was I always had the idea that there was a big sort of a grand plan in my head for something that would be like my opus. And doing freelancing just gave me the spare time to sort of get on with that, if you see what I mean. Except I didn't really know what I was penning. which made that a bit more difficult in the whole sort of. And I think recently it's come to. I read this great story about Dr. Seuss apparently, who when he started writing, he wanted to pen this this big sort of the Great American Novel or whatever it was, and the Dr. Seuss books were just his way of passing time and getting some money in. But obviously the Dr. Seuss books became his career-defining sort of thing, but they were never meant to be, hence writing them under the pseudonym of Dr. Seuss and, getting them out there, if you see what I mean. And I think recently, over the last few years maybe, I've thought perhaps if there is an opus to be had, if there's the Great American Novel or whatever's going to come out of my head at some point, I should just focus on the little bits first and see where they take me and that sort of stuff. So I think ultimately freelancing has given me the space to, I'd possibly prefer to end up doing in the long run rather than running an agency.
Okay, yeah. Do you get to pick and choose projects then? Are you quite comfortable turning down work if it's not if you don't think it's going to be enjoyable enough to work on?
When I first freelanced years ago, maybe 10 or so years ago, a bit longer than that perhaps, and I really struggled, and I'd take on anything that I could. And when you get into a situation where you take on everything you could, I think you start taking on jobs and you undervalue yourself and you undervalue how much you should get paid for a job, and you start panicking about work. So everything kind of follows one to the other. This time round, when I started freelance again, I was kind of aware about trying to value myself slightly better than beforehand, which certainly worked. But I think I certainly still suffered from the whole take on everything and, just in case kind of a route. And I found that really hard. It was, because you start taking on pieces that you're not necessarily, you don't enjoy doing and whatever else. And I think I've got to a point where I can turn down stuff, and I do turn down stuff. I think now I'll turn down bigger builds, whereas beforehand I might not have done. If I think this is going to take a month and a half or 6 weeks or 8 weeks, previously I might have taken it on and thought, okay, I can survive for 8 weeks. I'll be all right. I'll get this done.
Yeah.
But now that sort of job I would pass on or turn away because it's not fun. It's not profitable, and I get caught up in something. And when you're caught up in something for 8 weeks, you have to turn down everything else. And that's hard. I think. I mean, I take on a lot, and I'm averse to turning down people that I've worked with before, particularly if they pay well and they're really easy to work with. I'll just try and figure out a better way to schedule someone in and get on with it.
That is a problem for agencies as well, on understanding the value and how they charge for their work, just as it is for freelancers. It's a very common problem, and there's lots written about it. So do you think you've cracked that in terms of, are you charging enough now for what you do?
Depends who's watching. I don't know. It's a really, really tough question. How much you charge is, I think it sort of depends on. I started running a time tracker about 18 months ago, and tracking every project that I did and figuring out how long it was taking for that, and then thus how profitable the job was at the end of it. And I sort of came to realise that the jobs that I enjoyed less, I was making far more money on than the jobs I enjoyed more, which was irritating. I assume because the jobs I enjoy less, I'm just getting on with. Whereas the jobs I enjoy more, I spend slightly more time thinking about,
prevaricating and tweaking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I certainly, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I think I certainly suffered in the long run with taking more time than I should do on a project and charging someone for how long I should have spent, but spending more time on it because I just wanted to get it right, and because and I think kind of trying to get over that somewhat, like realising that I can't be a perfectionist for everything, because otherwise I just never do anything other than tweak.
You've got to ship it at some point.
Absolutely,
whatever it is.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has the right balance. I think I'm in a great position that I can be very lean and agile. I can get on with something, and I can undercut, but still charge. I can undercut an agency, but I can still charge something that's fair to me. But you know, again, I'm in a position where if someone says that we need this in a week, is it possible? Because I don't have to work 7.5 hours a day. You know, it's not like I'm in an office. I can sit in front of a laptop for 19 hours for 4 days running and get it done, which puts me in a pretty good position for that sort of stuff, if you see what I mean.
Do you find that even now? Do you find that a difficult way to live, in that you never know what projects are going to drop, especially if a lot of them are these last minute or rush job things, or is there lots out there in the marketplace at the moment?
Yeah, it is a difficult way. I think again it comes down to that you never want to turn down work because you never know when you're going to get work again. That said, I think there is a considerable amount of work, and I think there's enough work to go around for everybody. And I think the fact that the internet keeps getting more of a massive force in all of our
Bigger,
lives.
yeah.
Like there's just more room for this day in day out with everybody involved. So I don't think that's going to go anywhere, and I don't think that's. I think that the one thing that we have to sort of be more aware of, particularly someone like me, is that people get better at writing things to automate the process, you know. And if you can write a piece for someone that they can use again and again and again with, you know, just replacing the images or whatever else, and they can automate it themselves, you essentially have cut yourself out of work until they need something else that does the same sort of thing. You know, like writing a quiz platform for someone, for instance, they can use it once, they can change the questions, and they can get on with it and do it again.
So, do you find networking a really important part of attracting new business?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I think all the business I've had has come from that in one way or another.
You don't really do any other marketing; it's all word of mouth business.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's mostly going to events of some variety and talking to people and having a drink.
Yeah.
And you know, again, how we met through the wonders of alcohol.
Yeah.
And I think it's quite literally that. So going to an event, having a drink, chatting to people. Generally, I talk a pretty good game, and then it's mostly not selling yourself. I think I don't think people like to be sold to, particularly at an event like that. You don't, you know, if you go to a talk about something and you stand there and handing out your business card, saying to everyone, like, I'm brilliant, this is great, come and work with me. People get very sick of it very quickly, and I think if you just have a beer with someone and you just chat, and you know, you can learn a lot about their business and what they're doing. It's much easier to ask them to go for a coffee or to send them an email and say, if you have any problems with what you're doing on XXX that you mentioned last night, I can probably help with this, or give me a shout if I could be of any use. And those people quite often give you a shout, or if they don't give you a shout, they recommend you to someone that they know that's in a similar problem that, you know,
Sure.
they could benefit from. I think people like to work with people that they get along with.
Definitely.
And if you know that person, if you know you can go for a beer with that person, they seem reasonable, and they seem like if something comes up, you can speak. You know, they
That's
can speak
one
to you.
of the things we definitely do. We like to have clients. Obviously, we have longer term relationships with retainers, but we purposely will work with people that we get on with and seek those kind of people out. It helps us understand their business. It helps them understand ours, and when there are problems, which there inevitably are in any project, you can deal with it sensibly rather than.
I think that's it, absolutely, and I think people like to know that it can be dealt with sensibly. You know, you're not going to pick up the phone to someone or drop them an email and they're going to go, no, that's, you know, or.
So, have you got any tips on good networking events where you've picked up business? Indirectly, maybe, but.
Goodness, specific events. OMN has always been a good one.
Yeah, on the boat.
Gus Ferguson's event on the boat, which has always been always busy, and lots of people that are involved in kind of generic online marketing of some variety. But I think depending on your area of speciality, go to events that aren't what you do, if that makes sense. So
yes, absolutely.
I'm very unlikely to go and get development and design work or whatever else that people might be employing me for if I go to a web developer meetup, if you see what I mean. I might chat about things that might make my job easier, very unlikely to get work out of it. Whereas if I was quite lucky when I moved to London, I was considering a career change. I hated the agency I was working at beforehand, I think sort of when you're working for someone that tells you what to do and doesn't take on your recommendations, despite the fact they've employed you to be that specialist in an area, it gets very frustrating very quickly. Came to London, had no real idea what I was going to do in London with anything, but some of my own projects at the time I was interested in learning a bit more about SEO and doing that sort of thing, and I've been reading about it. I've seen the thing for London SEO, and it was literally like 2 weeks after I kind of arrived in London, and I went along and met a few people, and
yeah, perfect.
Basically,
Another good event.
yeah, it was a great event, and it was lovely, kind of meeting a whole new batch of people that I hadn't met before, and it was just I just turned up and got chatting as you do, if you know what I mean, and had a few drinks, and those people then sent me emails and said, like, here's another good event you could come to, try this. And I met a bunch of SEO people and kind of online marketing people, and those people were brilliant because they have a particular skill set that's really useful and really good, but they don't necessarily understand, they don't necessarily have someone that does bits that I could offer them, if you see what I mean. And when you know you can have a beer with someone and chat, and someone calls you up and says, look, got a bit of an emergency, can you help me with this, or can you do that? And I think a lot of the work I've got has come off relationships that I've made in those places, particularly with someone. Usually, I'll admit, usually they're in unless it's been a recommendation, usually they're in some sort of a hard place where they've had a developer or they've had a designer or they've had an anything that I could offer, and that person has, done something terrible, left, and something needs finishing, and it's can you help us with this? And yeah, I can most of the time, and then one thing leads to another.
This is an interesting question. You do design and development.
Yeah,
I think that's quite rare for people to be good at both. There is this stereotype or image that the design team and the development team don't speak the same language.
Right, so that's why I struggled at the agency I was at before this, where they had very sort of disparate design and development teams, and it was a design agency foremost, and so they would send over work and go, make the design, and you'd go, but that doesn't make any sense, it's an e-commerce site and it takes 3 clicks before you can get to any product. It's like that makes no sense. And they go, well, that's what the designers want, so make it. And and it was very frustrating. I think I started making websites when I was about 14, 15, like 1994, 1995, I guess. And
pretty much as soon as you could possibly do it, really.
Basically. I mean, we had like a 14.4 modem, and I was on BBSs doing like ASCII design and all that sort of stuff on BBSs. And we got the internet, we got a Demon account, and I ran up hundreds of pounds of the phone bill, smashed my parents' were out, as you do, and kind of the internet was this amazing thing. You could make something, and GeoCities you could put a web page on GeoCities, and it was like amazing in there. And I was just tinkering around, and I think at the time, you have Microsoft Paint and you have PaintShop Pro, and kind of, I've always been interested in design and street art and all that kind of thing. So that's always been something that I found interesting. And then I think I did a computer science degree, and my dissertation had nothing to do with anything in my degree, and I learned PHP in my dissertation, and then realised that it was quite a powerful sort of way to make interactive websites, stuff that did stuff and worked, and it was quite exciting. And I think just the two married quite well. And it puts you. I think also the reason I thought about SEO and got into sort of SEO and learned PPC and a bunch of other stuff was because when someone wants to do work and they want a piece doing, and they say this is how we're thinking about doing it, being able to say, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? Makes you a much more valuable sort of asset in there to them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there are some amazing designers out there, and there are some amazing developers.
Have you got any advice for how designers and developers, whether they're individuals or teams, can work better together? And break down that language barrier.
Yeah, it's a lot of talking. I think developers are very precious. They're very precious people. It's like, no offense if you're a developer, it's I'm one of you, sort of. It's that, like, I think just you've just got to understand that like someone spent a long time trying to learn something, design or development or whatever else, and no one likes to have their work criticised or slagged off. And I think you for both people have to be open to someone saying this is wrong or this is, you know, we need to do this differently.
You've got to come to it from a position of innate respect.
Yeah, absolutely,
but understand that someone's got a completely different viewpoint
correct.
on what's
someone spent quite a lot of time doing it, and I think, you know, at some point one of you's going to have to compromise over something, and everything else. I know it's a tough thing. I think it's becoming an odd thing as well. There's some amazing tools for developers now to have not terrible design, regardless of how
not terrible.
Like, well, I mean, if you look at some of the sort of developer-led designs 10 years ago, I mean,
they were gash.
It's a horror show, yeah. And I think now, kind of, you know, you can download a WordPress theme. There are plenty of sort of things that will make an all right design for you. You can use Bootstrap, and it kind of this, you know, the hard part's been done for you, and all that sort of stuff. I think designers need to sort of understand a bit of. I think, particularly as a designer, you need to understand UX, like user experience, and you need to get sort of. You need to get on that, and I think learning a bit of HTML would probably benefit you considerably in the long run. I think the difficulty is with designers and developers, for the most part, and massively, is I've totally lost my track of thought on this stuff. It's that we sort of designers, like historically, you knock something up in Photoshop, and you know, and then you give it to the developer or Fireworks, and then you know you give it to the developer, and the developer builds it. And I think now we're seeing like responsive designs have to be across both things. So you're getting designers going, okay, we'll design it in 3 thingies to send, you know, so this is what mobile, this is tablet, and this is thing. If you don't understand how the box model works and how flowing works between items on a web page, it's going to make it very difficult for you to go, this is what we want, and this one, this one, and this one. And I think, again, why designers should sort of learn a bit of HTML, but also just design in the browser. It's a lot easier to sort of design straight out in something, even for a small amount, if you see what I mean. And I think that's where, if you have a little bit of skills in both, it makes it a lot easier. You can cut half the journey out in one go by getting on it.
Okay. Do you think it's a good thing for somebody to specifically want to be able to do both things? Because I find that very rare. There are very few people that do design and development. Normally you get really good developers and really good designers, and while they might have done a little bit of what you're suggesting,
so being mediocre at both, is it?
No, but being good at both and being able to understand both, because they're very different skill sets. One is certainly more arty and the other is certainly more
I think it's
programmatic and scientific.
The thing is, it's about how long you want to spend learning something else, if you see what I mean. As a designer or a developer, you know, I think you can learn enough of the other one in order that you can get on with some projects, if you see what I mean. And I think there are always going to be small projects that, as a developer, if you take some time out and learn basic design fundamentals, you could just get on and do some projects. And as a designer, there are certainly a bunch of projects that you could design something pretty and you can make yourself and get on with. But it's a case of whether you want to do that. And I think, you know, quite often with everything in this whole sort of, you know, the people that you see that do SEO that go, not interested in PPC, I wouldn't touch that. Same with PPC. People that do PPC, I never. Why bother with SEO? You know, it's much quicker just to send some traffic, and I understand I can track it. You know, a lot of thing. And then both sides have got this great argument, but you know, it's such a pig-headed view where you think if you just took a step back and you put a bit of this in and you put a bit of this in, you're both going to succeed.
Absolutely. With
far
both
greater,
of those things, you can learn so much about the other channel from doing one, or even just doing a little bit of one.
Yeah, absolutely. It also puts you in a much better place for doing stuff by yourself. And I think for me, it was always knowing a bit of both meant that I could launch my own projects. You know, I can come up with an idea on Friday night when I'm in the pub, and by Sunday afternoon, I've got something on the internet that does something and works. And you know, and it's really exciting. It's like Lego when I was a kid. You know, you've got a bunch of bricks that mean nothing. And 5 minutes later, you know, an hour and a half later, you've got a house or a spaceship or a dinosaur or whatever else you can conceive in your head. And I think having the skills to take one thing to another one is is it's really nice to be able to do it. And
so you would subscribe to the view that rather than trying to be the best in the world at one thing, it's better to combine two things and be really good at doing
Jack
the
of all
culmination of those two things.
No, I wouldn't say that view specifically. I think there are people who are absolutely brilliant. I work with some amazing designers and developers who I have the utmost respect for, and who are never going to do anything. They're never going to come out of, say I can do this, this, and this. But what they do so well. They should keep doing it and do it to the absolute best of their ability. And I think that's great. I think that, I'm pretty restless, I think, and it's nice to be able to just dip into this, that, and the other. If I want to launch a PPC campaign, I can do it because I kind of know how to do it, and sort of if I want to design something, I can. If I need to make a poster for someone, I can. But at the same time,
sure,
if I need to work with an API, I can do that as well. And it's nice to be in that position. That said, there are plenty of times when I'll call people and say, "I'm totally stuck. Can you help me on this?" Yeah, absolutely. And there's, but it does give me, again, a place where an agency can come to me and I can get something done.
In terms of how that applies to us, I'm very much a jack of all trades. I've kind of know a little bit about web development and servers and design and user experience and conversion and analytics and social and SEO and content and all the other things that we do. But we've then got specialists that do each.
But don't you find do
each piece?
It puts you.
But we always encourage people to understand different parts of
totally.
What
and
don't
you find as well that once you understand a little bit about, a little bit of knowledge is obviously incredibly dangerous, as we all know, But I can fix this. But don't worry about it. It's cue many hours later of pain and trauma. I think just understanding it a bit more about this sort of stuff gives you much better insight when you're working with people, because you kind of have an idea of how long something's going to take someone. You kind of have an idea of what's involved in order to do this, and particularly in development, there's that massive can you just do this
scope
can you just can take the thing that looks like the tiniest change to someone that's never touched anything like that can take hours and hours and hours and days, whereas someone
we'll touch on that again in a minute.
Can you just do this, and you're like, yeah, and it takes 30 seconds, and it's they have a massive budget to just do this, but
okay. Are there any tools that you would recommend to other freelancers that are good things to use for running the business side of how they operate?
Yeah, totally. Google Calendar, obviously, is a great one just for making sure I've got everything in, and that's on my phone. It's there. It connects to Gmail. It's simple. I use Trello for a bunch of personal projects, and for sometimes. Other people, when you're working with agencies in particular, they usually have a way of doing it that makes
they want you to
them.
subscribe to, they want you to slot into.
Be on Basecamp or whatever else, and sort of that's fine for the most part. It does get a little frustrating when you're sort of looped in with their clients and there's thousands of emails popping to and from, which, being honest, I don't care about terribly much. It's sort of let me know what to do and I'll just do it and get on with it,
Yeah.
Hang on, let me think what else. Obviously, the obvious things, Dropbox and that sort of stuff are brilliant for, and Google Docs.
Yeah.
Sharing and collaboration and that sort of thing. I wrote a work planner a while back. A friend of mine and yours, Russell, who basically he had a go at me about not organising myself well enough, because I think we were meant to have a beer for about 3 weeks and I kept saying I can't come out right. So I've been working about 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day, something ridiculous. And he got angry at me and just put it in an Excel spreadsheet and just so you can see your days and you can see what's coming on. And I wrote a work planner that just does that. It has a top view of days. Each day has like 7 segments, and I can just drop a client on and it blocks out the whole week or whatever else. I found that very useful, just because it's such a top-down thing. When someone calls and says, can you do this, or can you do this at this date, I can go, right, the next date I can actually do anything is this date of something. That's very useful. I use Harvest for time tracking.
Yeah, so do we.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
Yeah, very good.
And accounts. That was when I started out. Again, had no real plan and no sort of
because all the ones so far are more as you're doing the work. These are useful things, but the account side of things is part of business that you don't really know you've got to do until you get into it.
Well, I panicked really badly. It was when I kind of came up and started doing this whole sort of freelancing thing. It was I kind of fell into the freelancing thing mostly because a friend of a friend, who was running an agency at the time, had called and said, "We're really stuck. Like, can you fix it? We've got 24 hours to fix this." And the developer has dropped off the planet. And you know, I didn't sleep for 36 hours and just ploughed this thing through and got it up and live for them. And after that, it was a very beneficial sort of relationship for both of us. And I did that for a couple of months, and I thought, do you know what, I've got money coming in, and I've still got to do a personal tax return. That's a pain in the arse.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to have to do something anyway. And if I've got money coming in, there's probably a more efficient way to do it. And did the sort of, you know, sent some emails to people and did a kind of quick Google search and had to figure out, and found Crunch, who are down in Brighton.
Right.
And I gave them a ring and said, how are we doing about this? And they said, look, if you're making X amount of money, you'll save this amount by becoming a limited company.
Yeah. By
getting on doing that. And it was really, it was one of those things I was probably trying to avoid, because not being a limited company, just like tax. I mean, I wasn't trying to avoid it. I was just trying to. The hassle sort of just stressed me out. Of, you know.
I should call you Jimmy Carr from now
on. No, not at all. It was just the hassle. The idea of thinking about money is a really stressful thing. Thinking about accountancy is a really stressful thing. And I called them, and they were so good. Taught me through it. Set up a limited company, and got me on it. And it's about £70 a month, I think. But it takes all the hassle out of everything I do. I log in. I can invoice straight from the thing. It lets me add all my clients, and any new clients, anyone I work with. It lets me add suppliers. Lets me expense stuff, and it just does it all online, and it's there, and it sends it out. And you know, account handler emails me and says, "You need to do this, Ben. You need to do that. You need to fill in these forms."
Right.
Like originally, I had the world's greatest account handler. He was such a good guy, and you know, forms that he was like, "Ben, I filled in this form for you. I'll post it to you. Just sign it and send it off." And that sort of stuff is totally invaluable as a sort of freelancer that just doesn't want to touch this stuff. It's amazing, and it was just, you know, being able to pump it out there and off it goes.
So they do the actual accountancy side as well as you've got a system that does your invoicing and
they do the everything. So like invoicing, like all the receipt tracking. You can photograph your receipts and it just goes in the system. You know, it's great, and it's it made it really simple and really, I don't know, took the pressure off it basically. And I think, bearing in mind, that was my biggest worry about doing anything on this sort of side of things.
Okay, that's a really good pointer then for people similar to you.
It's a good one.
Well, no, not really anybody's quite like you. Something else that might be difficult or problematic, certainly for people new to it, is dealing with contracts. Do you have contracts with all your clients? Do you set them up?
No. That's the honest answer. For the most part, I think there's an odd occasion, but for the most part, it's a handshake and an email. I think I like to get everything down in an email, numbers and sort of times and everything else, so that at least there's some record of it. But again, I think it comes to working with people that you get on with, and getting on with it. And I think if there's a problem, we can probably sort it out. And again, I'm one person. You can take me to court, and I'm going to get very far. You know, it's like sort of, well, you know. And I think that's it really, and I'd much rather just sort it out and get on with it. And that said, you know, touch wood, it's been like 4 years now, and we've been.
Okay, so that was a useless question, really.
I say that, you know, it's there is like, you know, there's been a number of jobs over the last 4 years that have actually completely gone down the shitter, as it were, and it's been okay, but obviously it's hard. It's, you know, when you spend 2 weeks on something or a week on something, and then the company folds, or they can't pay the bills, or they go into administration, or whatever else, and you've sent an invoice, and then you're like, cool, okay, that's you know, because it's not like
that stings.
It does, and it's not like it's. I think it's mostly because you could have been working on anything else, and you spent 2 weeks doing something, and it's not like there's other people there to back you up. It's just 2 weeks of wasted time, and someone's got the benefit from it because, you know, it's, you know, may have gone to their client or whatever else, and But I think it happens, and it's just, you have to take the rough with the smooth. And I think, again, I've had some great months and I've had some terrible months, and that's the way it goes, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's worth it at the end of the day. I'd rather do this.
You'd rather have the roller coaster.
I think I'd be making more money if I was working for someone else. Maybe I would be earning more for someone else, I'm sure. But I do enjoy the fact that if I want to go to the gym at 9 o'clock in the morning, I can. If I want to go to the gym at 11 o'clock in the morning, I can. If I want to go for a beer at 11 o'clock in the morning, I can as well. Do you know what I mean? And I like that. And I love the fact I can go for lunch with people.
You can do that working here.
You can offer me a job.
A bit of fun then. What's the worst thing that a client's ever asked you to do? Everyone's seen clients from hell and some of the stupid requests you get. One of our favourites that John had several years ago was the client asked, could you move this image half a pixel to the left?
Half a pixel?
Half a pixel.
Brilliant.
So that's and the other one, probably the most common one is, can you make our logo bigger? But you must have had some crackers as well.
Yeah, I think I quite enjoy when people go, would you be worried about working with, and then they say an industry, and that always makes me laugh because sort of I'm not unscrupulous. In fact, I've got quite a lot of scruples when it comes to some things, but if someone said, in fact, I'm not going to go where I wouldn't go, but basically I'm pretty liberal, and if you were taking sort of, would you work for the Westboro Baptist Church? Probably not.
Okay.
Depending on how much they're paying. No, I'm kidding. I mean, definitely not. But and I think that I quite enjoy that sort of stuff. I think if you've got a client that's a bit more edgy, that's quite fun as well. I've been on some really dumb things. I think it's mostly my biggest irritation is there's the could you just.
Yeah.
Because it's always massive scope creep, and it's always sort of, sometimes it's irritating, sometimes it's absolutely fine, but could you just is a pain in the arse. There's God, I'm just trying to think of some good ones. There is obviously the generic. I think people just like making their stamp on stuff, right? And you've got to realise who you're working with and what they're like with that kind of stuff. And there are some people that I've worked with in the past, some that really like just making a mark, just sort of no matter how good you do
some
something.
that'll let you run with it and they trust you to do it.
Do you know what, those are
that
I find it's usually again with I think with client work in general, when you're working with someone that's not managing, that has a budget but they're not managing the company budget, they're usually the best to work with because it's not their money. They don't have to check a bank account. It's just they just sign it off and they're done, and they just want the work done. They just want it out there, and they might change something. Could you make this slightly more on brand? Could you do this? Could you test? And that's absolutely fine. I think often if you're working with someone that's sort of controlling the purse strings, it's their money that's coming out. They really want to micro control what's going on. They want to get the most of their money, and that's totally understandable. But it can be quite frustrating, I think, at times. But yeah, it's like I read this great story the other day about a chess game, like a 3D chess game that was developed in San Francisco 10 years ago or something. And they developed it, and the Queen had a kind of little duck or something that was next to her, and as she moved around the board, the duck kind of waddled around after her. And when they showed it to their boss was like, "I love it. Everything about it is great. Get rid of the duck." And they knew the duck. They put the duck there just for that reason, because they knew he was going to have to put his stamp on something. So to get rid of the duck was, like a line of code. I thought that's great. I think that sums it up properly. Absolutely as best as it possibly can be. Some people just like to, get rid of the duck. And that's.
So do you build ducks into some of your things now? Now that you're aware of this, are you going to do that?
It depends who the client is, and I think certainly when you talk to some clients, you think they're going to want to change something on this, and I think once you send over something and say, "How are your thoughts on this? What are you thinking?" and depending on what they come back with at that point, depends on, what you're going to do for that sort of stuff, and it might be. But I think ultimately, just try and do the best thing you possibly can straight away and get it over with. But I'm quite happy to. It's again working for yourself. It's nice to be in the position where you can fight with someone if you want to, and you can say it's a really dumb idea what you're doing. But then you only have so much fight. There's a point. I'm quite happy to fight with people about particular stuff like landing pages, and you think you want a landing page for this, and you're recommending this is the way you should be doing it, this is going to make the most sense, and someone comes back to you and says, we need to move this here and move that here, and we need to put this, and we need some more links to this, this and this, and you're like, okay, you're totally defeating the purpose of what you're trying to achieve here, so, you know, wind it back, and let me explain to you why. You can only fight with someone so much before you go, do you know what, you're paying the bills, I'm quite happy, let's just make it and we'll get on with it.
Any thoughts on where the industry might be heading?
So internet marketing in general, I think everything's going to roll into, it's been happening the last few years, you must have seen this as, you know, doing what you guys do.
Yeah.
Like, I think everything's coming under a generic PR roof.
Less so PR from our point of view. I think we're subsuming PR.
That's what I mean. Sorry, they're all coming in together into one sort of fold, as it were. Like, I think PR are realising, offline PR are realising that they need online, and generic SEO companies are realising that having someone that's a little bit more, you know, lunches and phone calls is really good for them as well. And I think kind of that whole world is merging. I think, you know, the development design world, I mean, it's not going anywhere. I think there are some amazing tools out there. When I started doing this, you know, WordPress hadn't been sort of conceived at that point. And you think now, if you want to set up a website, you want to set up a blog, you can register a domain for about £8, and you can get hosting for absolute peanuts.
Yeah.
And you can set up a WordPress blog. You can put a free Cloudflare sort of thing to cope with your traffic, and you can just set up and run. And it's like, you know, the barrier for entry on any of this is really low. I suppose that's kind of why I've been doing a lot more content work than development design work, because unless someone wants something really specific, unless they're trying to do something, they just download a theme and they just reskin the theme and get on with it.
Okay, well, I think we're going to have to wrap this up now. As fun as it's been, thank you very much, Ben.
Thanks very much for having me.
Anytime. Maybe we'll have you back soon.
For drinks, hopefully.
Yeah.
So we're out now, so...
Let's go and get a pint now.
Let's do it.